I really thought it was just a mannequin laying in the ditch. And then I got a little closer and realized that it was an actual body.
You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. My name is James Wallner. Welcome back to the show. I get a lot of emails from listeners. Some just want to say hi or share their thoughts on a recent episode. Others send tips about cases I've already covered. Then there are the emails suggesting news stories, new seasons. Sometimes they've got a case they stumbled across online or maybe read in an old newspaper. Other times it's a memory from their childhood, a murder, a missing person, something half-remembered but unsettling enough that it stuck with them all these years. And then there are the hardest emails, the ones from family members. People still searching for answers, still holding on to hope. A daughter found dead under suspicious circumstances. A cousin who never made it back from a trip. A father shot while hunting, and no one held responsible. I read every email. I can't always help these folks with getting the word out on the podcast, although I do my best to share their story on social media. But every now and then, one comes along that I feel, compelled to help with as best I can. Today's episode is one of those cases. The case of Wilma June Nissen and her daughter's quest for justice. We've all heard stories about adopted kids trying to find their biological parents, and we've all heard about Jane Doe's unidentified murder victims. But when I got an email from Krissi Haas and heard her story, I knew I wanted to help however I could. And as you'll hear in this episode, maybe you can help her too. If you are around 65 or older and lived in Sioux Falls, South Dakota in 1978, close your eyes and think back to those days. She wants to know if you remember a couple of young women in the Sioux Falls area, club dancers who went by the name Peaches and Sugar. Or if the name Wilma Nissen rings a bell, also known as Amy or Boots. Is this a long shot? Of course it is. But a long shot is just about all Krissi has left to go on. That and some hopes of DNA technology in the future. A couple of segments of audio in this episode are from a YouTube video posted by Kelloland News in South Dakota. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can watch the video about this case in full. Now, let's meet Krissi Haas and hear her story. Krissi Haas, thank you so much for joining us on the show. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you. You've got a story to tell, definitely. When were you born and where?
I was born in Long Beach, California in August of 1977.
So you were adopted, is that correct?
I was told I was adopted from birth, but later on found out that I had actually been fostered for a few years, and then they proceeded into adoption. I lived with them from the time I was basically a newborn. I lived with them until I was 15, and I was a wild child, so I became a ward of the court at 15.
And when you say you're a wild child, can you tell us more about that?
Oh, I was that teenager you hope you don't have. I was that preteen and teenager. I was Snoopy. There was a very large age gap between my adoptive parents and myself. They were 65 and 71 when I was born.
And again, where was this?
Like in between Long Beach and Huntington Beach in Southern California. It's the LA area, Orange County, LA area.
At what point did you learn that they weren't your real parents, or did you know that very young? Or
I knew that from the beginning. That was part of the fostering and adopting, is they were required to tell me that they were not my natural parents. So I knew that they were not my natural parents from birth. I was raised to be very Catholic, went to Catholic school, didn't really fit in. I think that's part of what made me rebel so hard.
So they told you that you were adopted. Did they tell you who your biological parents were?
Absolutely not. They would not tell me anything for a lot of years. And finally, I don't know how old I was. I was probably 9 or 10 when they told me that they had actually fostered my mom, my biological mom.
Okay, so just so everyone's following here, your foster parents were also your mother's foster parents for a time.
Yeah.
And then you were born.
I actually was with them right away. Yeah, they fostered me for a few years and then they adopted me.
So they knew your mother, it turns out.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't sound like they wanted to tell you for quite a while.
No, they would never tell me. I think my mom, my adopted mom, she had a lot of health issues, so she was on a lot of medications, and I think one time she let it slip my mom's name.
Wow, so then you got her first name, Wilma. Did they end up telling you her full name?
No, they would not tell me anything about her. The most they told me about her was that she was a foster child of theirs. They made it sound like they had her pretty much her whole life, which I found out later was not true.
Did you always know you wanted to find out who your mother was?
The older I got, the more I thought about it, of course. When I was little, I wondered about it. Once I got into, double digits, I thought about it a lot and started asking questions. I was never mad at her or my biological dad for that matter. I was never mad at them for not being in my life. I figured they had a reason. I wasn't, it's not like I was left on the street, you know. I had a family. I was lucky to have a family, you know. So, but I did wonder about her. As a sneaky preteen, I found, I went snooping through a desk that they had that had papers that were, 30, 40 years old in it. And yeah, and I found my original birth certificate with my biological parents' names and my original name.
So you snooped it out on your own. How old were you?
Yeah, probably about 12 maybe. And I found a photograph as well, found a photograph of my biological mom, and I showed it to my adopted parents and asked if that was her, and they can't remember what they answered. I just remember that they took it away. Well, as soon as I found out her name, I started, this is the 90s, so it was pre-internet, started looking up in phone books and calling names that matched. I had talk shows. I had the Sally Jesse Raphael talk show looking for my mom.
So that was a big radio show, right?
It was a TV talk show. Mm-hmm. Figured they had more resources than I did, so and they did look for her for a couple of years, and they just finally messaged me that they tried, but they couldn't find any information.
And then what happened after that? You kept looking for you. Well, you went on with your life, I assume, and
in 8th grade, I made a friend, and his mom decided to search for my birth parents. She found my biological dad when I was 17, and he actually lived like 30 minutes from me.
Did you get to meet him?
I did. I met him a few times. He died in 2000, but he had no idea what had happened to my mom, and there just wasn't a connection so much between him and I.
I assume you asked him, like, what was she like? Tell me about my mom. And was he able to help with any of that?
Not really, no. I don't think they were together very long. I think they were together maybe a year. I think I was an oopsie.
So you find your father. He's not able to help you much with learning more about your mom. He doesn't know where she is. And then where does it all go from there?
Went on with my life. Then the internet came about right about that time. Started going on, adoption forums and people searches and anything I could think of to try to find my biological mom, because it was her that I really wanted to find.
Did you have any luck at all?
No, nothing. Yeah, she was just vanished. Well, I did some stupid stuff in my 20s. I moved to Vegas. I worked at clubs. I had a drug problem. I screwed up. Did that for a while, and then my adopted mother got cancer, so I came back to California to take care of her. She died the day after 9/11. So I stayed because my dad was in his 90s, and my special needs sister was acting out, and I stayed there and I worked at a club there, and I, again, developed a drug habit.
Let's go to the day, I guess you could say someone found your mother. And how did you learn about that?
I had a knock on my door, and my then boyfriend, now my husband, was there, and he opened the door, and it was my friend's mom. And she came in and was like, what's your biological mom's name? And I told her, and she was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And she hands me a newspaper article saying that they had identified a Jane Doe. That was a homicide case from 1978 in northwest Iowa.
A 23-year-old Wilma Nissen's life was as troubling as her death. Nissen was the Jane Doe found murdered in a ditch in northwest Iowa in 1978.
Nissen, who had been working as an escort and dancer out of Sioux Falls, wasn't identified until nearly 30 years after she was killed.
How did that hit you?
I honestly don't have a good answer for that. I was in so much, I think I was in shock. I was going through so much and trying to, I'd recently gotten off of drugs, and I was in shock. But I called the Rock Rapids Sheriff's Department in charge of her case. I called them and said, I think you found my mom. And it was definitely, I guess surreal might be a word for it.
Before we get to the murder, can you just tell us what you've learned about your mother and her life?
Her life was, she lived a horrible life. I mean, her whole existence was just tragedy after tragedy. She had a younger sister named Mona who was deaf and mute. The mom left the family when they were very young, and their father was extremely neglectful, and I consider abusive. He would go to work and he would lock the girls in the closet. They were stuck in a closet all day for however long he was gone. No bathroom, no water, no whatever. They'd never been to school. He lost his job, and the family of three was living in a car. And at that point, they were in the LA, Orange County area. And I don't know where he was, but he would lock the special needs sister in the trunk and send Wilma, who was 9 or maybe early in on 10, to the streets to look for food alone. Thankfully, Child Protective Services found out, and they took the girls away from the father. No charges were ever pressed against him, but CPS stepped in, took the girls. Wilma went to a very amazing couple that at the time lived in Anaheim, California. Their names are Marshall and Maxine Holty. She was still 10 when she went to them. She had never been to school. She couldn't read. She couldn't write. She couldn't even write her own first name. She didn't know how to use a fork. She hadn't been taught the most basic skills. They were amazing people. They had 2 other foster children at the time. They showed me, I did go visit them, and they showed me home videos of Wilma and her, like the first Christmas she ever had. They taught her to read up to a first grade level, some very basic math. They taught her how to write. They loved her. She loved them. She almost immediately started calling Marshall Daddy. And Maxine was teaching her, and there's a quote she has somewhere out there, and Maxine told me that she said, thank you. I mean, this may not be verbatim, but thank you, Mother, for teaching me so many things.
Wow.
They had a dog, and she'd never had a pet. She was enthralled with this dog. And she was just, after all she'd been through, she was such a sweet kid. Maxine told me about one of her sisters came over, and she was a little under the weather. So my mom, Wilma, went in the backyard and picked a rose and gave her a rose to help her feel better.
It's a great story.
I'm like, that's so sweet. After all the stuff she'd been through.
And she had to leave them when she was about, 10? Or how long did they have her?
I can't remember if it was a year and a half or 2 years, somewhere in that line. And then she went to her last foster family, which was my adoptive parents. My adoptive parents told me that when she was 18, she went for a walk and just didn't come back. She was she'd never had stability. She'd only had a taste of love. And I'm figuring she was probably, even though what she went through as a small child, when it comes to, love and, guys and stuff, I think she was probably pretty naive.
Sure.
And being that she spent those, couple the important teenage years with the people that raised me, I know they didn't teach her anything other than, go to church and be a good girl. She ended up getting married very shortly after she turned 18 to her first husband. I know she had 2 children, two boys before me, but she met my biological father that had a little shop in Bellflower and got pregnant with me.
And how old were you when she put you up for adoption?
Very new. I was told by my adoptive parents that it was pre-planned, but I found out later that it wasn't exactly pre-planned. So that's all kind of a question mark in my head.
And do we know where Wilma went after that?
Kind of. From what the sheriff's department tracked down, and I have no idea how they tracked this down, there were rumors that someone wanted to hurt her and that another sex worker asked a man named Charles Inman Belt to drive her to get her out of town.
Okay.
And he took her to Georgia to stay with his mom.
Okay.
And she was there that was says here, February of 1978. That might be off by a month or two. So she traveled to Atlanta with this Charles Inman Belt. He told detectives that, she was staying at his mother's apartment and she left a few days after. On October 4th, 1978, that's when they found her body. Yeah, she'd been deceased for a couple of months.
She was found pretty close to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, really, even though...
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Nobody knows how exactly she ended up there, but she ended up working for an escort service that went by Playgirls and or Playmates, and they serviced the Sioux Falls area, Northwest Iowa, that general area, and she might have been working a party. Her body was found dragged into a ditch, a rural roadside ditch in Lyon County, Iowa, really close to Sioux Falls.
Wilma's body was discovered by the worker just about 20 inches from the gravel road, but it was hidden by high weeds that weren't mowed at the time.
First thing I thought was a mannequin. I really thought it was just a mannequin.
She was wearing white half-length go-go boots with a hemp rope, braided hemp rope, not to bind her legs, but I think to drag her. She had khaki green pants on and bikini-style underwear, but they were around her left ankle, nude from the waist up, except for a gold and silver-colored friendship ring. And like I said, she was severely decomposed. All but 2 of her teeth were smashed out, her upper teeth, and her lower jaw was completely missing.
So you've spoken with law enforcement working on this case, is that correct?
I have. That one's a tricky answer since it's been so long. When they first identified her, yes, the law enforcement, of course, couldn't tell me everything, but they did communicate with me. They were very nice, and they were very patient with me. They were very nice. They told me what they could, but it was Sheriff Blumendahl was the sheriff when they identified her. And unfortunately, he had to retire. He had a family emergency, so he had to retire. And the lead detective was ex-detective Jerry Berkey. He's still out there, but he's no longer a detective. He moved to a different branch of government.
So what's the status of your mother's murder investigation, I guess, today?
It is cold, but it is still supposedly active. Unfortunately, since Detective Berkey and Sheriff Blumendahl have retired, it's been harder and harder to maintain communication with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
The older the case gets, the younger the sheriffs get. If it happened before they were born or when they were little kids, I can understand why to them it's like, who cares? Or at least that's how I feel. But I do everything I can to try and stay in touch with them, I guess. They did exhume her body in 2007, hoping for DNA. Unfortunately, the casket was full of water. However, they were able to determine the cause of death, which they have not released to anyone, me or the public. The sheriff's department doesn't really communicate with me much.
I saw also they do, even though couldn't get DNA from your mother's body, they do have some DNA from the evidence. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe it was from the rope. They sent it off. I don't know how long ago it was. I found out in 2021 that they sent off the rope and her clothes to a Scandinavian company. I don't know which company, but it was cutting edge DNA technology at the time. So they were able to make amplified DNA. And with the amplified DNA, they were able to rule out like the police that had touched the rope.
So they found DNA from a human being who had touched that rope that wasn't your mother, and it wasn't law enforcement investigators. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, they found multiple DNA.
So it seems to me, if they have that, they should be honing in on someone, no?
Well, since it was amplified DNA, they weren't able to, I guess it wasn't viable with CODIS. There's something. But I'm sure if they had that information in 2021, they might have had it before then. I'm almost positive with the technology advancements in DNA that if they were to pursue it, they could at least get more answers. Maybe they couldn't get a definite, but they could rule out. They could either say that the suspects they have were there, or at least one of them were there or were not there. So they could rule out or confirm. And I have personally reached out to multiple forensic DNA genealogy companies, and I think it could be done. I think there could either be a grant or it could be done at little to no cost to the sheriff's department, but they just don't want to talk to me about it.
They have a couple people of interest, right? You want to tell us about them?
Okay, so I told you that my mom was working for an escort service that ran out of Sioux Falls, and there were two other women that also worked for this escort service that were known for robbing other escorts, and they were known for robbing clients and having a violent streak. They went by the stage names Sugar and Peaches. They were in their mid to late 20s, around 1978. They don't have any pictures or information. They have no idea about Peaches, but they do know who Sugar is, where Sugar is. They know all of her information. I know she's failed 3 polygraph tests, but she just keeps denying that she has anything to do with it. Well, I mean, a lot of people have died because it's been almost 50 years. But they need somebody because there are people that went to these parties. They need somebody who can identify Peaches or Sugar or saw them perhaps with Wilma. Also, Wilma went, as far as I know, and this is before, she went by these names before she started escorting, but people are like, oh yes, her stage name was. No, but she went by the name Amy, and she went by the name Boots. Sometimes she might have gone by another name. Yes, Boots and Amy, but she could have gone by other names.
And who was this? Your mom or?
My mom. These two women are believed to have robbed her. And then, although I can't find any information, authorities swear that they left the country, and because Peaches is from the Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada area. So they apparently left the country. I don't know if they fled the country. That's the word that's been used. They did leave the country, and then there was an altercation where I believe Sugar stabbed someone. I don't think it was fatal, but she did stab someone in Canada. So they came back.
And this is information you learned from law enforcement?
Yes. Yeah, they need someone that knows who these women are or might know who these women are to come forward. And if someone's afraid to talk to the police, I have multiple social medias and a private email that people can send me the information, and I will personally look into it and tell the police. And I've got a list of other tip lines. I had someone I actually talked to from one of the, I made a Facebook page that got deleted for my mom's case. Now I've got a group, and I spoke to someone who lives in Rock Rapids, and they had a very interesting story that all lined up right around the time that Wilma was murdered. And they called the sheriff's department, the lead detective, and they felt like she just kind of like, okay, whatever, kind of blew them off. Yeah, it was very dismissive. So they told me, and they asked me if I thought they were crazy, and I'm like, no, I think that totally should be looked into.
In the show notes of this episode, I'm adding several links to tip lines as well as Krissi's email address. If you lived in Sioux Falls, South Dakota in 1978 and recall women who went by the name of Peaches or Sugar, or if the name Wilma Nissen rings a bell, also known as Amy or Boots, Krissi would love to hear from you. She doesn't care how trivial or insignificant a detail you think you may have. She wants to hear anything about her mother.
They think she was leaving an adult party in South Dakota, or maybe perhaps was killed or at that party, or somebody might have been at that party and seen something, and they don't think it's significant, but they might have seen something that led up to it. And if they want to contact me, but they saw something, or if anyone even just knew her and would like to tell me about her, I would love to talk to them. I don't care how they knew her. I don't care if they were a client, if they picked her up hitchhiking, if they were a friend, if they were a frenemy. I don't care. I just want to know about my mom. Or if they remember Sugar and Peaches, that could also be very helpful. And there is a picture of Sugar from back then. Yeah, my mom's case is going on 46 years right now, and they still won't tell me. If anything, they're telling me less now than they did when they first identified her.
Before I signed off with Krissi, I asked her what she would say if she was somehow able to communicate with her deceased biological mother, Wilma Nissen. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Oh God, there'd be so much. I couldn't even begin to tell you where I'd start. I think I'd have to tell her I'm so sorry for what you went through growing up. Yeah, that would be a long, lots of going in circles, going left, ADD squirrel conversation. But I feel like I just have this connection with her because like I said, I made a lot of bad decisions in my 20s. I would go off to Vegas and nobody would hear from me. I didn't have a specific home. I wore boots, nothing but boots. I mean, there's just maybe it's just me grasping at straws, but I feel this uncanny amount of things we had in common. We would have either been friends or we would have hated each other.
That's probably very accurate, yeah. And maybe a little bit of both.
Maybe.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing she lived to the age she was, but to be murdered like that is just, for her to go through all that horrificness in her childhood, and then she was barely an adult